Try to do Midsummer Night's Dream in one day, but we'll probably not get it all done today, simply because I do want to finish up what I started on whatever day that was last week, Thursday, about some general background information regarding Shakespeare. Okay, trying to think how to do this. I think we left off the other day, or we were talking about the period roughly from 1585 to 92 as being what are often called the lost years, or Bevington in his introduction, which I on the syllabus asked you to read, calls the 7 dark years, okay? Because we don't know what Shakespeare was doing during that period. And he gives, some of the suggestions for what Shakespeare was doing. But again, we have no proof. What we know is that in 1585, the twins were born, and we have Shakespeare's name mentioned on the baptismal certificate and birth certificates. Next time we hear a reference to Shakespeare, okay, is in 1592. Okay? And this is from the introduction, Roman numeral LXI, which is what, 61? Or 111? One of the two. Where Bevington copies a fairly long portion from Green's Groat's Worth of Wit. Green is a university wit, which is a title given to those generally younger men who had gone to university and become writers in London. That's their occupation. They're not doing something else. They've made a name for themselves as writers. Green was a hack writer. He wasn't a great. Nobody reads Thomas Green today. Okay, for intellectual or aesthetic enjoyment. If they read Thomas Green, it's because they're required to read him for a college course, or somebody is searching for a dissertation topic. Because if you're a medievalist or Renaissance specialist, because people have had 600 years to write about possible topics, often what dissertation directors advise students to do is find something obscure that nobody has written about. There's a lot about Green that nobody has written about because nothing is worth writing about him, okay? So, Robert Greene, not Thomas Green. Green, in 1592, writes this pamphlet called Green's Groat's Worth of Wit, Bought with $1,000,000 of Repentance. A groat's worth is like a penny. So, it's worth a penny, he's essentially saying. And in this, he kind of lambasts his fellow writers for allowing an upstart to kind of take their place. And the fellow writers he's talking about are not hacks like himself. Okay? Christopher Marlowe is one of them. Now, Marlowe, prior to Shakespeare, Marlowe was the towering figure of English theater. Okay? He was on the kind of beginning the downward spiral by the time Shakespeare hits the scene. But he gives this diatribe, and towards the end of the paragraph that's included in your introduction, he writes, "For there is an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, that with his," and he has in quotation marks, "with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide," unquote, supposes he is well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you, and being an absolute in italics, Johannes Factotum, jack of all trades, okay, is in his only conceit the only shake-scene in a country. Okay? Well, tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide is a clear reference to Henry, the third part of Henry VI, or 3 Henry VI, however you want to refer to those, where Shakespeare has the line, "A tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide." So he takes that line from 3 Henry 6, which is telling us that by 1592, that line has been written. Okay? And Green is familiar with it. Familiar with it enough, it stuck in his mind and he copied it out. Okay? So we can say, third part of Henry VI, definitely written by that date. All right? But it also tells us Shakespeare has already made such a name for himself that some of the established writers are afraid of him. Okay? Now, Green dies that same year, 1592, late in September. Okay? He dies penniless. He's poor. He's broke. Why? Because his stuff isn't selling. That's why I said he's a hack writer. But the person who publishes this Green's Groats Worth of Wit, etc., a guy by the name of Henry Chettle, saw this manuscript through press. Okay, he publishes essentially an apology later. And in this apology, he describes this shake scene, this upstart crow, all right, and says, talking about this individual, it kind of says, I'm sorry I didn't temper, I didn't soften what was said in that earlier writing, Green's Groats Worth of Wit. He says, I'm sorry that I didn't temper this. I am as sorry as if the original fault had been my fault. That is, as if I had written it. Now, Bevington mentions some scholars think Chettle did actually write that it wasn't Green. Okay? Just throwing that out there. But, he goes on, because myself have seen his demeanor, that is his, this upstart crow's, have seen his demeanor no less civil than he excellent in the quality he professes. Besides, divers of worship have reported his uprightness of dealing. That is, diverse people of worth, high-standing individuals, have spoken about this quote-unquote upstart crow's uprightness of dealing, which argues his honesty and his facetious grace in writing that approves his art. Now, what Chettle is saying here is that the person that Green belittled is worthy of attention, has the respect of high-standing people, and is deserving of praise for his art. Okay? That's essentially all in 1592. So, Shakespeare's missing from the record 1585 to 92. But this fairly clearly indicates he's been doing something in London for at least a couple of years to merit this kind of attention. Well, then just a couple of years after that, he and several others form what are called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Right? The Lord Chamberlain is essentially the right-hand man to the Queen. In other words, second most powerful person in the country. Okay? So he's the patron of a group of actors. This is an acting company. It's not, where they're just receiving handouts from him. When they form this group, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, that means they have, essentially in modern language, they've incorporated Lord Chamberlain's Men LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. There's stock involved. Okay? So that when Shakespeare is writing plays for the Lord Chamberlain's Men, which later becomes the King's Company, the King's Men, in 1603 when King James becomes king, he's writing plays for a variety of reasons. One is artistic, and I'm not saying one meaning it's the most important reason for Shakespeare, but two, he's got to figure out, as he's writing his plays, if this is the theater that he's writing for, how to make sure every one of these seats is full. Why? Gate receipts. He gets a portion. Shakespeare gets a portion, gets a percentage of every ticket sold. He's not only the greatest literary artist England has produced, he's also a businessman. And I know, in liberal art circles, businessman is a four-letter word. He's got to make money. And that's one of the things he is about, making money. He's got to write plays that do what? First and foremost, sell. Modern terminology would be what? Blockbusters. He writes the things that are drawing people into, let's use modern terminology again, the big screen. Those multi-mega million blockbusters. Okay? Why? The more he brings in, the more he takes home. Okay? So, Chamberlain's been 94. In 1599, the Globe is built. Okay? But it's not like they just suddenly buy land south of the Thames and build a theater. No, we got to go back in time a little bit. 1576, Burbage, it's not Richard Burbage, it's his father. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Up a couple pages. And I don't have it marked real quickly. Burbage. I can't remember which. There's two Burbage. There's a Thomas Burbage and a Richard Burbage. One of them was contemporary Shakespeare's. That was part of Lord Chamberlain's, etc. The other one is his father. And I'm drawing a blank as to which is which. Pardon? Thomas's. Okay. Thomas Burbage built a place for putting on plays in 1576. And he gives it the very unique name, the theater. That's it. He just names it the theater. Okay? It's built, however, on leased land. This is in an area of England called, area of London called Shoreditch. It's north of the Thames River, okay, and it's kind of east of the city. The city is a 1 mile area of London. It's the original London founded by the Romans. Okay, go to England, take my Harry Potter class in London, where we do a 7-mile walking tour of it, and you will see around each of the entrances and exits of the actual city within London proper, there are lions. Okay? And the lions face outward. They're symbolic representations of protection. They protect the city. Okay? So you have the city of London, and then further on west, down the Thames, you have the city of Westminster, okay, which is where Westminster Abbey is, which is where Parliament is, which is where the government is. The city in London today, that's the financial center. Nobody actually lives in the city. There aren't apartments or houses there. Okay? So, Shoreditch is north and slightly east of the city. And when I say north and east, I'm not talking miles and miles. It's like a mile and a half, north and east. Okay? So that's where Burbage raises the theater in 1576. In 1599, the lease on the land comes due. So he has an option. Either surrender the theater to the owner of the property, the land, in which case he no longer owns the theater, or destroy it. Okay? So what Burbage's son and Shakespeare and the other members of the Lord Chamberlain's men do is they have the theater deconstructed. It's taken apart bit by bit. And it's rebuilt south of the Thames in the area of London today called Southwark. It's where the Canterbury Tales begins. At a tavern, at an inn called the Tavern in Southwark, Chaucer says. Okay, so south of the Thames, and they rename this theater the Globe. It's not an actual circle. It's close. It's got 22 sides. Okay. Why do they raise it south of the Thames? Anybody know?
Because laws were passed that all theaters and things of that nature had to be outside the city, south of the city.
Well, it wasn't necessarily that they had to be outside the city. It was that if they are inside the city, they are governed by the laws of the city and the Lord Mayor of London. And the Lord Mayor of London could close establishments drop of a hat. Okay? And in the 1590s, the playhouses were all closed because of an outbreak of plague. Right? From about 1594, 95 through about early 97. It's when some people think Shakespeare probably wrote quite a few of the sonnets. He wasn't writing plays, or writing and producing plays, let's say. Right? So they move south of the river. Why? Because they're no longer in the city. They're no longer governed by the laws of the city. The Lord Mayor of London can rant and rave as much as he wants. He can't touch them there. So you have the Globe raised down there. You have the Swan raised down there. You have the Bear raised. You get the Curtain. A whole bunch of theaters are all built up on the south side of the Thames. If you go to London today, you can go to the original site. Which one is it? Either the Swan or the Curtain. And it's essentially a pit underneath an apartment building. I saw a production of, I guess I could call it a production, of Macbeth there a few years ago. It's a very weird production. Okay, and it's essentially, they got like 2x8s nailed to some uprights for the seating, and then the play goes on here, and behind the play is literally a pit. And you can see around the edges of the pits the foundations of whichever theater it was. Okay. Today's Globe is not on the actual site of the Globe. It's about 400 yards west of the original Globe. The original Globe was discovered after a big old apartment building was put up on it. That is, the foundations of it were. Okay. But it's based upon the exact same construction size, what we know of the construction of a Globe. It was built according to the same way. It was built using the same methods. I was there in 95 when they were finishing up the construction of the Globe. And it's an amazing feat. Okay? So the Globe is built in 99. The Globe burns down June 29th, 1613, during a production of Henry VIII, I think. Okay? They fire off a cannon. The wadding inside the cannon lands on the thatched roof, burns to the ground in a matter of hours. Okay? It then gets reconstructed, but then it gets torn down again during the period of the English Civil Wars of the 1640s. The reconstructed Globe does have thatched roof. Okay? But within the layers of thatch, there's also steel sheeting. It can't burn down past that. Okay? The walls and everything are built exactly the way they were in Shakespeare's day. The only real difference is, one, they do have electric lighting. They don't have a sound, well, take that back. They do have a sound system. They don't use it for the actors. So if you're sitting in the back of the Globe, third gallery, back up against the wall, you can hear the actors on the stage who are good, at that point, 70 feet away. Okay? You can hear them when they talk without really projecting. I mean, it's kind of that intimate a setting. Okay? The only major difference is the number of people who can sit in the Globe today as opposed to Shakespeare's day. Today, if I remember right, it'll seat about 1,500 or so. Shakespeare's day, it would seat over 3,000. We're bigger. We are physically bigger than Elizabethan Londoners.
Oh, it doesn't just seat more. It's the same size.
It's the same size.
Capacity.
It's just we're larger. Okay, we're about anywhere 2 to 3 inches higher and a few inches more this way, especially. Okay, but other than that, and because of that, and because of modern comfort requirements, longer legroom, things like that. Okay. Okay, Midsummer, let's jump to the Midsummer Night's Dream. Midsummer Night's Dream dates from around 1595. Why do I say around? Because we don't know an actual date. We know Francis Mears refers to it in his, and this is from the introduction, refers to it in his pamphlet. That's not one I want to write with. I want to say Tamia. Might be Timia. Palladis, it's either Tamia or Timia. In 1598. Okay. It's also referred to in Philip Henslow's diary. If you saw Shakespeare in Love, Geoffrey Rush plays the part of Philip Henslow. Philip Henslow was a producer/director of plays. He worked for a while with the Lord Chamberlain's men. He worked with the Admiral's men, which were a competing company. Okay. But he kept a pretty good diary of what was going on in the London playhouses. And that's how we know about the titles of some plays. It's how we know also about the titles of some plays that no longer exist. Okay. For example, I think it's Henslow, it might be Mears, refers to a play by Shakespeare called Love's Labour's Won. We have Love's Labour's Lost. We don't have Love's Labour's Won. If somebody were to be rummaging around through a library over in London, let's say the library of a large manor house, and they came across a manuscript that had Love Labour's Won by William Shakespeare, and it was written in 17th century or 16th century secretary hand, okay? And it could be dated by the handwriting, by the ink, by the vellum, or paper it's written on, etc. That would be a huge, major discovery, especially if it were written in Shakespeare's hand, because we know what Shakespeare's handwriting looks like. We have samples of it on some what are called foul copies, as well as some fair copies of plays, manuscript copies. Okay? We have Shakespeare's alterations, his emendations of texts written in some. We don't have any of the plays written entirely in Shakespeare's hand. More than likely, probably, because those were used to either set what are called quarto copies, quarto refers to the size of the printed book, or the first folio into print. And often what would happen is the printer would so mess up that manuscript copy, it would just be thrown away. It would get ink on it and things like that. Okay? So we don't have any of those. We don't have any of the sonnets written in Shakespeare's handwriting.
You referred to the first folio a couple times. What is that?
The first folio is the first collected edition of Shakespeare's plays. Okay? (1623). I could run over my office and get it. It's about yay tall, about that wide, and about that thick. Okay? It has not all of the plays, but almost all of the plays. It's the primary source for over half of Shakespeare's plays. That is, over half of Shakespeare's plays are not printed before the first folio. Quite a few of the plays are printed before the first folio. Okay? Hamlet exists in a version before the first folio. King Lear. Both of these plays, by the way, I said, exist in a version. That is, earlier versions of the play are substantially different than the version that you get in the first folio. Okay? So that you have speeches that show up in these quarto versions. Quarto refers to size. Take a sheet of paper. I don't have any individual sheets of paper. Take a sheet of paper, fold it in half. Okay? That's a folio. Okay? Now we're talking about not an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. We're talking about a large, what's called a broadsheet that is used to print on. So a large broadsheet would be about the size of the top of this podium. Okay? So you fold that in half, that's a folio. That gives you 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. Okay? Quarto, you take that and then you fold it again. Okay? So take this size, fold it once, that's like here, fold it again, and you end up with something almost this size, a little bit smaller. So you keep folding, and the smaller and the smaller and the smaller the book you get. So that you have actually printed in the Renaissance, you have some books that are printed that are literally about 2.5, 3 inches tall and about 1.5 inches wide. And some of them are like this thick. You get little versions of the Bible or the New Testament like that. Okay? They're very hard to print because of their size. They're very hard to bind because of the size. Right? So most publications in Shakespeare's day are quartos and folios. Right? Some of Shakespeare's plays, as far as we know, I'm going to say almost. Almost all of those that are published in quarto are published without Shakespeare's permission, as far as we know. Okay? The sonnets are published, as far as we know, without Shakespeare's permission in 1609. We never see one where it says, imprinted with the permission of the author. Okay? And we're not exactly sure why. This is one of the arguments the so-called anti-Stratfordians use to say Shakespeare didn't write. Shakespeare, the guy from Stratford-on-Avon, didn't write any of this stuff. Somebody else did. Somebody of noble birth, first of all, and high educational standing. Okay? Because somebody who did not attend university could not be the author of these plays. You had to have gone to university in order to be this kind of writer. Well, some of that goes back to what Green was talking about. You know, he's essentially saying this country bumpkin is putting us out of our places. We can't allow this to happen. Okay, and Bevington talks about the anti-Stratfordian movement, and you can tell he doesn't really care for the anti-Stratfordians, essentially because they really have no argument. They have no proof to say William Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon is not the same William Shakespeare who wrote the plays, to whom the plays and sonnets and long poems, etc., are attributed. Okay? So Midsummer Night's Dream. We say 1595. It's referred to by Mears in 1598. So we know it exists by then. A quarto of it is published in 1600. And it's entered into what's called the Stationer's Register. The Stationer's Register is essentially the government's publication licensing board. In order to get something published, you have to enter it into the Stationer's Register. That is, essentially, the Board of Censors get to say whether or not you will be able to publish it. We know books that were entered into the Stationer's Register and were not published because they weren't allowed to. Okay? John Donne, contemporary of Shakespeare, wrote a whole bunch of poetry. Okay? And in the first collected edition, my dissertation was undone. In the first collected edition of Donne's poetry in 1633, a bunch of poems that were included in the entry to the Stationer's Register were not included in the first edition of his poetry. Probably because they were thought to be too risque. To use modern language, they were dirty poems. Okay? So, it's probably around this day. When Mears refers to it in this, he's talking about having seen it. Okay, so we know it's been in production. So, jump to Midsummer Night's Dream. How many of you have seen Midsummer Night's Dream? Anybody seen it in production? Okay, a few of you have. Need my calendar to remind me when we end. So, about 40 minutes. So, what's the general plot of A Midsummer Night's Dream? Okay, first of all, when is it set?
Ancient Greece.
Okay, it's where it's set. I guess you could say when to, ancient Greece. Okay? When, time frame. Look at the title.
Oh, summer.
Yeah, it's midsummer. Okay, that's when it's set. Okay? It's supposed to occur middle of summer. So, late June, early July. It's a Midsummer Night's Dream. What are dreams? Louder?
Figments of your imagination.
Figments of your imagination. In other words, dreams aren't what?
Real.
They're not real. Okay? So the title is telling us this. So, how much import do you account a dream? How much significance? Take Freud Jung and Freud out of the picture. Man, it's too early for those kind of portmanteaus to be created by my mind. Do dreams, quote unquote, guide your daily existence, your life? No, not usually. You wake up and go, huh, that was interesting, and then go on your merry way, okay? So, dreams, dreaming, figments of your imagination figure prominently. Okay, now, ancient Greece. Why set this in ancient Greece? Well, let me back up. Who are the characters? Who's the Duke of Athens? Theseus. Why Theseus? Well, one, he's an ancient literary character. He's an ancient mythological character. In other words, Shakespeare's not just creating characters out of thin air. He's relying on sources. Now, we don't have an exact specific source for Midsummer Night's Dream. We do have sources. For example, Theseus, Hippolyta, Queen of the Amazons. All right? Almost all of you have probably seen Wonder Woman. She was there. Not quite the same Hippolyta as we see in Shakespeare, etc. Okay? We see the fairies, Oberon and Titania. Shakespeare doesn't create them out of thin air. They figure in the English popular mythological imagination, so to speak. Okay? Athens is a real place, a physical place. The wood outside Athens, not so much. You're going to see when we get to the next play, As You Like It, you also have a city, and then outside it is the Forest of Arden. Well, guess what is outside Stratford-on-Avon? A forest named Arden. In fact, Arden is one of Shakespeare's family names. It's his mother's maiden name. Okay? So he's pulling sources, left and right, right? So, general plot. What's happening at the beginning of the play? Or what is set to happen in 4 days' time? A wedding between Theseus and Hippolyta. Okay? Theseus, Duke of Athens, is getting ready to wed Hippolyta, Queen of the Amazons. Why? I thought she's Queen of the Amazons. I thought Amazons weren't supposed to like men. He defeated her in war. Spoils of war, in other words. Not troll, not slave, not his whore. Shakespeare elevates her a little bit over some of the Greek versions of the Theseus Hippolyta story. Okay. He's defeated her in war, and she has agreed to marry him in 4 days' time when there is a new moon. Okay. So that's the opening, so to speak. I know we get another little opening between the fairies, but we're going to leave that aside for a moment. Okay. So, a wedding. What kind of event is this?
Pretty major.
Major event, positive or negative? Positive, unless you're Catherine McKinnon and you think, all marriages are nothing but rape. Okay. This is a positive event. This is a good thing. All right? And what happens almost immediately from our introduction to this good event coming on up? Well, we have the introduction of the four lovers. Is it four lovers, really? Isn't it really three lovers and one wannabe lover? I mean, because it's Hermia comes in. She is the daughter of Aegeus. Okay. And Hermia, let's do this. Hermia loves whom? Lysander. Demetrius comes in, and Demetrius loves whom? Hermia. And Helena comes in, and Helena loves whom? Demetrius. Notice, everything's topsy-turvy. This isn't the way love is supposed to be, right? I mean, we actually hear, the course of true love never did run smooth, Shakespeare writes. Okay? Because Aegeus, her father, says what? He wants Hermia to marry, let's do it this way, Demetrius. Okay? It's the age-old problem, right? Fathers not letting their daughters marry who they want, but instead making them marry who the fathers want. So that Lysander smarts off and says to Demetrius, you have Aegeus' love, you marry him. And, Shakespeare, stepping on all kinds of taboo topics there. Okay? So, these two love each other. He loves her, she doesn't love him. She loves him, he doesn't love her. Though we do find out fairly quickly on, he did love her, but then changed his mind, so to speak. So where is true love? Is it Theseus Hippolyta? Or is that merely an arrangement of power relations? I mean, Queen of the Amazons, King of Athens, Duke of Athens. So, the marriage is set up, and then you get this wrinkle thrown in. Well, how is it a wrinkle? What are we told? We're told Hermia must decide what? Within 4 days. Whether she will consent to marry Demetrius, or what does Aegeus ask for from Duke Theseus? Or her death. Follow the law. That's speaking as a father of two daughters, that's a little severe. What option does Theseus throw into the mix? Yeah, abjure the company of men forever, he says. Let's pick up there. Line 65. Hermia has just asked, okay, my lord, tell me, so what's the worst I can face if I don't marry Demetrius? Either to die the death or to abjure forever the society of men. And then he explains what he really means. Therefore, fair Hermia, question your desires. Know of your youth, examine well your blood. He doesn't mean let your blood out and say, okay, now how does that look? What does he mean, examine well your blood? Know your passions. You're young, maybe late adolescence, could be early 20s. We're not told specifically. But what's he mean? Your hormones are raging. Okay? Whether, if you yield not to your father's choice, you can endure the livery of a nun, the clothing, but what's he mean? Not having sex. Can you do that, Hermia? For I to be in shady cloister mew, to live a barren sister all your life, chanting faint hymns to the cold, fruitless moon. Okay? Thrice blessed. He's not knocking that life. Thrice blessed, they that master sow their blood to undergo such maiden pilgrimage. Pilgrimage implies what? A journey to a known destination. What's the destination? Is it just death without sex ever? A chaste life for all your life? Or is this a subtle way of Shakespeare weaving in there's something after death? Even though this is said in pre-Christian times. But earthlier happy, earthlier, what does that mean? Bodily. Okay? Bodily happier is the rose distilled than that which, withering on the virgin thorn, grows, lives, and dies in single blessedness. The rose distilled. How do you distill a rose? Is that making perfume out of it? What do you mean by distilled? You take the essence of something. So how can a rose be distilled? By taking the essence of it and doing what? Making another one. It's an idea he does a lot in the early sonnets. This idea of take your beauty. He's talking to the golden-haired youth, a young man in the sonnets. And he says, take your beauty and go marry. Why? Reproduce. Why? Because it would be a crime for you not to leave behind an heir with that beauty. Pick your most beautiful person in the world, male or female. And have Shakespeare say to that person, you owe it to the world to reproduce. Why? Because you're so drop-dead gorgeous. Okay? Members of my family would say, Chris Hemsworth. My wife would say, Sean Connery. Even 90-year-old Sean Connery, Okay? Pick your women, Cindy Crawford, whatever. Why? Because, as Shakespeare will say in the sonnets, we want beautiful women to reproduce. Beautiful people to reproduce. We don't want ugly people to reproduce, right? I mean, brass tacks here. You see two god-awful ugly people. I mean, one eye up here, a nose down. And we go, no, please don't. Don't, ruin the gene pool. That's what he's getting at. So he goes on. Hermia, so will I grow, so live, so die my lord, ere I will yield my virgin patent up unto his lordship. No, I'm going to die a virgin before I give it up to him. She doesn't like Demetrius. Not in that way, at least. Okay? He says, okay, take time, pause. By the next new moon, which is my wedding day. Is this really a smart move on Theseus' part? Does he want the very day he's getting married to be the very day he either sentences a young woman to her death or to the convent? Kind of would put a sour taste maybe on the wedding festivities. You can maybe hear or think of Hippolyta on that wedding night going, I'm just really not interested. Upon that day, either prepare to die for disobedience to your father's will, or else to wed Demetrius as he would. Demetrius, come on, Hermia, relent. Lysander, you have her father's love, Demetrius. Let me have Hermia's. Do you marry him? Okay? And Aegeus doesn't like that, scornful, like he's saying, shut up, you. So what does Lysander do? He says, compare us. Come here, Demetrius. Compare us. What does he say? I am as well derived as he, meaning my family is as good as his family. Okay, he's a Rockefeller. I'm a Carnegie. Equals, in other words. That's what he means by that. Okay? What else? And I am as well possessed. That is, I have as much loot as he has. Okay? My love is more. In other words, family standing and wealth were equal, but I love more than he does. My fortunes everywhere is fairly ranked, if not with vantage, as Demetrius. And he says, and more than all this, she loves me. Shouldn't that figure in? Oh, and by the way, he made love to Nadar's daughter. Not literally, not what we mean by made love. He means he wooed, he courted Helena to the extent that Helena fell in love with him. And now, he's changed. Theseus, yeah, I heard about that. In other words, Demetrius, we need to talk, okay? So, Aegeus, Demetrius, and Theseus leave, and we're left behind with Lysander and Hermia. And Lysander says the line, the course of true love never did run smooth, okay? So, he comes up with an idea. He says, meet me, and we will run off to the wood, where I have a doting aunt who loves me, and she will give me everything. That is, I'm her heir. And we'll get married there. Why? Like the globe on the south bank of the Thames, outside the reach of Athenian law. If we get married here, he says, Theseus can't touch us. Aegeus can't touch us. We will be safe. Okay? Hermia agrees. And then what does she do? This is all part of Shakespeare's complication. How he complicates the plot. She tells her best friend, Helena. Why? Is she telling Helena, hey, come on, run off to the woods with us. You can be free there. We don't really know why she tells Helena, but she tells her. And so what does Helena do? She tells Demetrius. Why? To gain favor with him. But she has to know what's Demetrius going to do. He's going to run off to the wood. For what purpose? Yeah, to stop them. Okay. So what is Helena then going to do? Chase after him. She is going to be what Demetrius will refer to her as. His spaniel. Nipping at his heels as he runs off away. Okay? So, we get to the end of Act 1, Scene 1, and we get Act 1, Scene 2. Okay? The rude mechanicals. Why are they called the rude mechanicals? Rude means what? Unlearned. It doesn't mean they have bad manners. It means they are uncouth, unlearned. Mechanicals, because they work with their hands for a living. These are not people who work with their minds for a living, though I would personally take offense with that, because if you're a woodworker, if you're a weaver, you do work with your mind for a living. You know, because if you're a weaver and you're not using your mind, you're going to break your fingers in the loom. If you're a woodworker and you're not using your mind, you're going to cut a finger off with a chisel or a hatchet or a saw or bang it with a hammer, etc. Okay? So what's the purpose of the rude mechanicals? Comic relief. What else? What are they talking about in this scene? They want to prepare a play for the wedding. The Duke has sent out, we need entertainment for my wedding. And they're like, yeah, we can do this. No, they can't. They really can't. Okay. So then we get the next scene where we get introduced to the fairy element. Okay. And Puck enters. Puck, by the way, the very name is ancient. Puck is related to puka, okay, which is an Indian word. I mean, this is Indo-European. It goes back thousands of years. Think of Puck kind of like in our modern conception, we think of like poltergeists, troubling spirits, practical joke playing spirits. Think, if you're familiar with the Harry Potter stories, of Peeves, the poltergeist, you know, who likes to move people's things and drop things on their heads and such. So, Puck tells the other fairy to take heed because the king doth keep his revels here tonight. Who's the king? Oberon, king of the fairies, and his wife is Titania. Okay? So, we see Puck, we see the other fairy, and then we see Oberon enter with his train of fairies behind him, and Titania enter with her train of fairies. Oberon, ill met by moonlight, proud Titania. In other words, this is not an advantageous meeting. And she, what? Jealous Oberon? Jealous of what? Fairy skip hence, I have forsworn his bed and company. Notice what she puts first. The king and I aren't sleeping together. What does that tell us?
It's not the best marriage.
Yeah, one, he's not getting lucky tonight. It's not the best marriage. Okay? The fairies represent, where do I put this? The supernatural. Oh, I could put that up here too. Natural. Supernatural. Fairies represent the supernatural. In other words, there is something wrong in the order of the universe. Okay? Something, to paraphrase Hamlet, is out of joint. Okay? What does that mean? Well, according to the way it was thought the universe worked in Shakespeare's day, if something is out of joint in the supernatural world, that has repercussions here. Okay? That means things will be out of joint here. Why? Because they believed in, even though they did not use this terminology, they believed in the great chain of being, above which is God, totally separate from everything made. Why? Because God is self-existent. God is not made. But from the highest order of creation, the cherubim and seraphim, highest of the angelic orders, all the way down to, I don't know what we would call today, a nuon or gluon or some, whatever the smallest particle of matter is. All of this stuff is connected in a giant chain. And you all played something like Whiplash as a kid, where you're, maybe on roller skates or ice skates, you all hold hands and you start moving and you do what? You crack that whip, and what happens to the person at the end? They go flying, okay? You remove a link and what happens? Everything else becomes untethered, okay? The link has been removed in the supernatural realm. Why? The king and queen of the fairies are not getting along. Well, what are the consequences for the rest of reality? We hear reference to it in these speeches. There are out of season fogs. There are eclipses of the moon. Those are all signs that something's not right. Okay? So, what's causing this discord between Oberon and Titania? A child. Whose child, and why is it causing this discord? A votress of Titania's, that is, a woman follower, or supplicant, or disciple if you want, of Titania's, who died, has a young boy. And Titania has the young boy in her train of fairies. This is an earthling, a human child. We would call this, and Shakespeare calls this, a changeling. Okay? What is a changeling? When the fairies come and take a human child out of the crib or out of the bed, and sometimes replace that child with one of their own. So, your child grows up to be an axe murderer. Not my kid, that's a changeling. You see this in film sometimes. In, which one is it? The Avengers film, the first one. You've got that great scene when they're up in the flying aircraft carrier thing, and they're talking to Thor about all the stuff his brother's done, and what does he say? Adopted brother. In other words, we're not really related. He means he's a changeling. He's not a real Asgardian, right? Because he's a frost giant, okay? Strictly speaking. A lot of people, by the way, a lot of quote-unquote adoption groups really did not like that line. Because what does that say about adoption? And adoptees. Kind of persnickety, but... Theseus wants the child to be in his train. That's it. He wants the boy to be one of his henchmen. That's causing this discord. So, she leaves. Titania and her fairies leave. They give the ground to Oberon. And what does he do? He says, line 146, page 159, "Well, go thy way, thou shalt not from this grove, till I torment thee for this injury." In other words, you won't leave the forest until I get what's mine. Okay? So we see Puck and Oberon conspire. And what does Oberon say he's going to do? He's going to take that flower that Puck's going to go get, and he's going to sprinkle the juice of it, love and idleness. He's going to sprinkle the juice of it on Titania's eyes, so that when the next thing she sees, when she wakes up, she will be wildly, madly in love with it. And he hopes it's some kind of wild beast. Bear or lion or pard, leopard. Okay? It so turns out, when she awakes, what does she see? Bottom, transformed with the head of an ass. Okay? The lovers enter. Where are we now? We're in the forest. Okay? So we've left Athens. Athens represents one, humanity, law, reason, rationality, order, nature. The wood represents, or is governed by, if you want, the fairies, freedom, irrationality, chaos, the supernatural. It's the opposite of Athens, in other words. Okay? So Demetrius comes in. being followed by Helena. They talk back and forth quite a bit. Demetrius exits. Helena exits. Oberon is standing on the stage during all of this. Unbeknownst by Demetrius and Helena, he's invisible. One of the productions I've seen of this at the Globe in London, my wife and I saw this in summer of 2002. I loved the way they did this. Because they used a fairly small troupe to portray both the fairies and the elves, okay, they did not change costuming at all. They had on what were essentially pajamas. I mean, it's a Midsummer Night's Dream, after all. So they're wearing pajamas. And then when the actors were meant to be portraying the fairies, they had a switch, kind of like Spider-Man, on their wrist. And all they did was they pressed the button. And then they had like Christmas lights sewn into the pajamas. And these lights would go on. So that they'd walk around and kind of have this glow. Because the lights weren't on the outside, they were like on the underside. So their cloth would just kind of have this shimmer to it. Very, very cool. Okay? So Oberon is back there lit up while all this is going on. But the humans don't see him. So they leave, and Oberon says what? Ere do he leave this grove, thou shalt fly him, and he shall seek thy love. In other words, turnabout's fair play. Okay? Does he mean you are going to hate him? No. He means what? At the beginning, between these two, we were told Demetrius sought her love and gained it. Well, that's what's going to be restored. Oberon is telling us. Okay? So, Oberon takes some of the flour from Puck, when Puck returns, and tells him, there's an Athenian youth in the wood. Go find him, sprinkle this on his eyes. You'll know him by his Athenian garb. He says there's a sweet Athenian lady in love with a disdainful youth, anoint his eyes, etc. He says, meanwhile, I'm going to go take this and anoint Titania's eyes. So we see Titania come in. She and her fairies fall asleep. Oberon puts the juice on her eye and says, Act 2, Scene 2, what thou seest, line 34 or so, what thou seest when thou dost wake, do it for thy true love take. Love and languish for his sake, be it ounce or cat or bear, pard or boar with bristled hair. In thy eye that shall appear when thou wakest, it is thy dear. Wake when some vile thing, he's not happy with her, okay? So, Hermia and Lysander come in. More complication, right? Because now there's not just one Athenian youth wearing Athenian rags, clothes. Now there are two. So, they come in, they talk, they have nice little gentle double entendre banter going on, because Lysander wants to sleep next to Hermia, and she's like, come on, Lysander, a little farther off, We shouldn't do that, not yet. So they sleep, separated, we're told, by a short distance. Puck comes in. Athenian chick, Athenian kid. Must be him. Puts the potion in his eyes. Hermia comes in, wakes them up, and Lysander says, line, 115 or so. Content with Hermia? No. Helena comes in. Content with Hermia? No, I do repent the tedious minutes I with her have spent. Not Hermia, but Helena I love. So now we have Lysander loving Helena, Hermia loving Lysander, Dimitri, Fubar, you know. Yeah, it's just messed up beyond all recognition, okay? So, we get Act 3, Scene 1, which in Shakespeare's plays is often a very pivotal act and scene, okay? The players come in, the rude mechanicals. They start putting on their practice performance. Bottom leaves the stage. Puck transforms him. Bottom comes back out. All the others run because he now is a human with an ass's head. Okay? And Bottom, to calm his nerves, starts to sing a song and awakens Titania. Now, what should Bottom look like other than an ass's head? Physically, how should he be? Should he be Chris Hemsworth with an ass's head? Probably not. Should he be grossly, obesely fat? Probably not. Okay? Simply because he's a manual laborer. He works with his hands and he's on his feet a lot. Okay? What about Titania? Drop dead gorgeous is what Titania should be. Okay? Bottom, not. She wakes up. What angel wakes me from my flowery bed? And he keeps singing. I pray thee, gentle mortal, sing again. Line 130. Actually, 132. Mine ear is much enamored of thy note. Now, when Bottom sings, should this be Andrea Bocelli? No, this should be me, who can't carry a tune. Okay? This should be the ooze, and I'm exaggerating here, the ooze o' cock so black of hue, with orange tawny bill, the throstle with his note so true, the wren with little quill. Sing again, mine ear is much enamored of thy note. That's telling you something's wrong with her ear. Okay? Not only her eyes, so is mine eye enthralled to thy shape. Enthralled, enslaved. Okay? Bottom. When she says, I love thee, listen to Bottom. Methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that. Notice what he introduces. Reason and love. Okay? And yet, to say the truth, reason and love keep little company together nowadays. Now, this, I think, is Shakespeare saying, should reason and love keep little company? Should love be, in other words, reasonable? I don't mean rational, but should it make sense? Reason and love keep little company together nowadays. The more the pity that some honest neighbors will not make them friends. Shakespeare, it seems to me, is saying reason and love should be friends. Love shouldn't be completely irrational, completely crazy, completely mad. Okay? Thou art as wise as thou art beautiful. Yet, Titania's comment implies what? How beautiful is he? Not. So what about his wisdom? Or does she say thou art as wise as thou art beautiful because she merely doesn't see correctly? Is she saying, is Shakespeare saying he's not being wise because she has said his wisdom is like his beauty? Okay. It's not quite clear.
It'd be more of a she sees something as doing beautiful things, so he actually, what he says is actually very wise.
Love is blind.
Is love blind? Okay? According to the classical perspective, classical meaning mythological, Cupid. Does Cupid go around searching for people and saying, these two would make a great couple? So I'm going to wait until they're looking at each other and bam, hit them both with my arrow? No. Why? Because Cupid is blindfolded in some versions. In others, he's literally blind. He can't see. He's like Stevie Wonder with a bow and arrow. You know? And where those arrows hit. See, I think bottom is saying love shouldn't be blind. Okay? So she says, you're going to stay here whether you want to or not. He's just become what? Her slave. Okay? This is part of the medieval tradition of fairies. Okay? Read medieval literature that deals with fairies, like Lonval, Thomas Chester, etc. And what do you hear? You hear about beings who take humans to their world, the Celtic otherworld, and do what with them? Enslave them sexually. Humans become sex slaves. I mean, the original sex trafficking for the fairies or for the elves. Sometimes those humans are allowed to come back and they tell stories about it. Other times they just live their lives out there. Okay? I mean, it's not all fun and games to be captured by a fairy. Okay? Act 3, Scene 2. Oberon comes in and he says, I wonder if Titania be awake. Now, when my wife and I saw this in 2002, the guy playing Oberon also played Theseus. His name's Paul Higgins. I've never seen him in anything else. I don't think I've found him on IMDb. But he's Scottish. And like Gerard Butler handsome. I mean, just really nice to look at. And my wife has a thing for Scots. And he had this great, rich, thick Scottish accent. And for that production, and my wife stands about this tall. She's like 5'1" and a quarter. That quarter is important. Okay? We got groundling tickets to the Globe. Okay, groundling tickets are where you stand in the yard. You stand. You pay £5. You have to stand the entire performance. You try to sit down, one of the docents will come and stand you up. Okay? And we got there early enough to be front and center. Because the Globe, Globe looks like this. Stage is like this. You've got the galleries here, 3 levels. So people are standing all over. There's a big column here and a big column here. And then there's a variety of columns holding up the galleries. We got literally right there. I think we arrived, half hour early. So when they opened the gates, we thundered through. And so I'm standing there, and I'm like this on the stage. And she's standing there, and she's like this on the stage. And he comes out for this act, and he comes out, and he leans down, and looks dead in my wife's eyes, and says, I wonder if Titania be awake. And she says, yes. And I'm like, Karen, shut the hell up. Because immediately, like, 2,000 sets of eyes are just right there. And he gets this big grin on his face. He goes, no. Is there a no in the text? No, there is not. This is one of the wonderful things about the Globe. They play on the audience. Okay? They try to get the audience involved. Now, they do it a lot more today than they did then. Because today, they often have the players making entrances and exits out through the audience. Back in 2002, the Globe had only been open for about 7 years. It opened the year that it opened the year after. The year I saw it during its construction, in 1996 is when it opened, I think. Okay? So they weren't doing a lot externally, but, they would do that kind of stuff. Or, it often happens at a very auspicious time, there was supposed to be some kind of sound off stage. And a big old 757's flying into Heathrow just at that moment, coming right overhead. And everybody looks up. Or the gods are doing something. And you hear this, because those suckers fly in like 1,000 feet over the globe. Okay? So she says, no. My wife says, yes. He goes, no. And she goes, yeah, she is. Then what it was, he turned that around. Then what was it that next came in her eye? So he asks her a question rather than makes a statement. And she said, an ass. No! Yes, And then he goes on. And then when they came out for their vows at the end, he kind of does this. And she was just, on cloud nine for the whole remainder of the week or so we had left there. Okay? So, Puck tells him what happens. And Oberon says, oh, this is good. Line 35 or so. This falls out better than I could devise. But hast thou yet latched the Athenians' eyes with the love juice? And in come Demetrius and Hermia. And Oberon says, here he is. Puck. That's the woman, but that's not the man. In other words, that's not the one I put the love juice on. So, Hermia comes in with Demetrius, and then Lysander and Helena come in. And what do we see? Essentially, a free-for-all. Okay? So that Oberon turns to Puck, okay, line 88, and says, what hast thou done? What kind of mood is Oberon in? Okay, my reading of it gave you my interpretation of it. Because sometimes, depending upon the production, it's, what hast thou done? And it sounds like Oberon is slightly amused. I don't think he is. I think Oberon is really quite perturbed at what Puck has done. Why? Because Oberon is concerned with love running smoothly. Or at least in my reading, he seems to be. Thou hast mistaken quite, and laid the love juice on some true love's site. In other words, you've now turned true love false. Okay? Shakespeare sonnet 116. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Okay? The whole sonnet is about what is true love. And of thy misprision must perforce ensue some true love turned and not a false turn to true. Puck, then it's fate. Not my fault, fate did it. Why? Because one man holding troth, a million fail, confounding oath on oath. Now, what is Puck saying there? For every one man that is true in love, you have what? A million who are not. So what's Puck's view on love? It's not real. I mean, that's his way of saying there is no such thing as real love. It's nothing but animal wrecking. It's nothing but sex, really. Okay? Oberon, however, says what to do. He wants to fix things. Go find Helena, bring her in. And Puck comes back in and says, here's Helena, and here's the youth. Oops, sorry, mistook by me. He says, shall we their fond pageant see? Fond, what does he mean? Foolish. Their foolish pageant, their play. What's he saying? He's saying, oh, this is going to be good. I got to watch this. That's what he means. Okay? And then notice his next line. Lord, what fools these mortals be. Why? Why are we mortals fools? Dumbledore says something about it in Book 5 of Harry Potter at the end. He talks about we fools who love. That's why. So do the fairies not love? Puck when Oberon says, shh, be quiet, they're about to wake up. Puck, then will two at once woo one. Okay. Who are the two who will woo one? Demetrius and Lysander are going to woo Helena, who was the one left out at the beginning. And now Hermia is left out, and Hermia is thinking, Helena, you little witch, you took my lover away from me. Okay? You can have Demetrius. Then must needs be sport alone, and those things do best please me that befall preposterously. So we see the big scene between the four lovers. And what happens? What does Helena accidentally say that so angers Hermia? And this is important for the casting. She refers, Hermia believes, to Hermia's height. Because Helena is supposed to be tall and willowy. Hermia, short and dark. Not necessarily dark skin, but dark of hair at least. And when we saw the production in 2002, Helena, tall, lithe, blonde. Like the actress who plays, not Wonder Girl, Supergirl. And Hermia was about 5'2", with real short, black hair. Okay? So, Helena says something, and Hermia says, have you come by night and stolen my love's heart from me, like 282 and following? And Helena calls her, you counterfeit, you puppet. Hermia, puppet? Oh, so that's what it is. You've used your height, your stature, okay? And then she won't let that go. I mean, like a dog on a bone. She just gnaws that thing. She jumps at Helena, etc. Okay? So, while all that goes on, Oberon says to Puck, this is thy negligence. Still thou mistake. Still means always, constantly. In other words, you always screw up. Or else commits thy knaveries willfully, or you did it on purpose. No. I mistook. Didn't you tell me I would know the man by his Athenian garb? Look, Athenian garb. First one I saw. Not my fault. Okay? It's 9:24. We'll stop there. We'll pick up with Act 3, Scene 2, and finish this, try to finish it fairly quickly. There's not very many more pages. So, have As You Like It, or most of it, read for Thursday, and expect maybe a quiz over Midsummer